Stick on the news this week and you'll be hit with a barrage of climate propaganda that the world is internally combusting. Parts of the Northern Hemisphere are experiencing a heatwave in summer. I mean, who'd have thought it? But if the relentless messaging reminds you of COVID-era brainwashing, it's because broadcasters like Sky News have teamed up with the same nudge units that pushed pandemic fear porn just a few years ago. Sly's partnership with the notorious behavioural insights team aims to, quote, shift the behaviour of millions by convincing Britons the world is going to end. So, like COVID, are we now being nudged into net zero submission? My next guests, Laura Dodsworth and Patrick Fagan, think so, and they've detailed the chilling methods used in their brilliant new book, Free Your Mind, The New World of Manipulation and How to Resist It. Patrick, a behavioural scientist, and Laura, who previously authored the bestseller A State of Fear, both join me live. So, this is really terrifying stuff, isn't it, Laura, because you exposed the fear porn during the course of the COVID pandemic, and now they're trying to do the same thing about just a little bit of hot weather. You know, you've got Sky saying, oh, no one's going to want to go on holiday soon. It's going to be too hot.
I know. I mean, absolutely. Gosh, we couldn't have planned... In a way, we couldn't have planned the launch of this book better, because I think so many people are waking up to this feeling of a net tightening, truth being squashed, institutions being captured, and a real artificiality in news and messaging. I think, you know, trust in news at the moment is at historic lows. So the messaging about climate at the moment is completely off the scale. You mentioned Sky News. There was a news report yesterday that said that a car had burst into flames on an LA freeway during a heat wave, but they didn't know if it was heat-related. Well, of course it's not heat-related, otherwise there'd be no cars in Saudi Arabia or the global south. What they're trying to do constantly is link heat with danger. And the reason they're doing that, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. They probably supposedly have our best interests at heart. They're trying to encourage people to decarbonise their lifestyles and conform to net zero, which is it's quite a contentious political policy, let's not forget. So back in 2021, the Nudge Unit and Sky wrote a joint report all about how to use the gamut of TV to influence people. And interestingly, in this document, it's quite astonishing in the audacity of its suggestions, including product placement and news segments, it says that TV has been used before for public health purposes, for instance, historically. So the key word there is historic. There's a real admission that TV is used for social engineering. And, you know, we have a chapter in the book on how TV is used for propaganda purposes. And we use the environment as a case study
which
too.
Which is so worrying. So, Patrick, what can folk do? What can we do? Because if this messaging is everywhere and it's around us, how do we know what's true and how do we avoid falling into the trap of this fear porn?
It's very difficult. You know, we're all biased in some ways. We're all brainwashable in some ways. But there are a few things you can do. So for the book, we did interview a magician, and I asked, how can you not get tricked by the magician? And his answer was, don't go to the circus. So there's an element, if you don't want to be brainwashed and tricked, you have to just try and scale back your exposure to this information a bit. Then there's also a level of immunity you can get. So the more you know about these techniques, by, for example, reading the book, the more immunity that you have, you're less likely to fall for them because you can spot them in the wild. And then there's some practical things. Meditation is actually quite good. There's some research showing that it can reduce vulnerability to bias. Also, going for walks, eating well, sleeping well, all of these things can kind of lift your rationality up a bit.
And Laura, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess the government has been doing this for some time, but it was really only during COVID where it exploded into the mainstream. And you were the first to ask questions, really, about why the government has this big unit specifically designed to scare and manipulate us. Is it a responsible way for our taxpayer money to be spent?
Well, I think that's a really good question. Look, propaganda is as old as time. Persuasion is just integral to human beings. So there's nothing new under the sun. Governments have always used propaganda, but it is very different that they're using sophisticated psychological techniques which are supposed to be covert, subliminal and work below the level of consciousness. Now, you know, when this unit was first set up, what's colloquially called the Nudge Unit, the people themselves said the British public should be consulted on the use of this because it changes your relationship with the government. You know, we have a transactional relationship with the government. We pay taxes and we expect the government to provide services for us. The government serves us. But when the government is trying to soften you up for policies without you being aware of the techniques, that changes the whole relationship. Of course, we've never had that consultation. So I think there are some very big questions to ask about ethics. My feeling at the end of the pandemic and after writing A State of Fear was there's no government white knight. You know, you can't expect the government to swoop in and save you. There's no ethical body coming to save you. If you think about society being in a state of freefall right now with, you know, woke ideology and fact checkers and truth verifiers and shadowy surveillance units, the first thing you need to do when societies are playing in freefall is you put on your oxygen mask. There is so much that you can do to reclaim control over your own mind. Now, those nudgers have a very reductive and a quite dim view of humanity. They think of you as little units to be modified. They think they can just tinker and change your behaviour and change your mind. But we don't hold human beings in the same view at all. We think that human beings are incredible. The human mind is wondrous. And everybody wants to be an individual and in control of your mind. And there are so many techniques that you can learn and tips and general psychological principles to live by to enable you to be a sovereign of your own mind.
Fascinating stuff. Well, there it is. Free Your Mind by Laura Dodsworth and Patrick Fagan, the next bestseller. Great to have you both here.